IDs is null, then we need to fetch the best guess intervals, which are the latest intervals for all interval contexts. Okay, so that would basically be a grab all unique intervals, grab the latest of that interval, do we have an enum for the different interval types? Interval contexts, let me see. We have stat interval, so all time, seasonal, monthly, weekly, and daily. Okay, so we do. So we're gonna do like statsdb to like, we need another specific thing here because basically it's gonna be select star from stats dot user intervals where alright, it's going to be this order by start time descending, group by interval context. So we'll get a unique interval context, but it'll be specific start time. All right, so okay, so it'll be group by context. We'll order by the start time. User interval. No, this isn't. Yeah, okay, it's just stat interval. Group by interval context. Did I remember to put a semicolon on the end of this previous thing? I don't think so. So let's do that. Let's see. I can mark down how many users we got. All right. So I think I'd like to make this a function that I actually call. So probably a public array list of stat intervals, fetch latest stat intervals, yeah. I could just return the actual query like that. Might be the best idea. All right, so we want to fill out our parameters. So to fill out our parameters, we need to do nothing, don't we? It's just this is not actually a thing. It's just a simple query. All right. Well, we'll just have to do nothing. That's fine. Whatever. So we're gonna say result dot set object, and this will be user stat results from result set. Is it from result set? Yeah, array from result set. Just having to get back into actually doing like service code stuff. It's been a very long time. It's what happens on this kind of these smaller projects is you're the only person working on it, so that's kind of what you get is since you're not always warm on something. Just got to get back into it. What is it? It should be stat interval. No, it's stats. Interval ID. Cool. So we'll add all those. All right. So let's see. Fetch the latest round of intervals, if not specified. Yeah, I think the worst thing was when one guy on Dragon Age Legends, he put a database, he put a call where it was a Facebook game, so for every one of your friends, it would grab their player state. So there are people on Facebook games that have 2,000 friends, so when one of these people logs in, it would just in a tight loop do 2,000 calls to the database. And it took down our servers. Long story short, he took down the servers, but it wasn't even like calling 2,000 people. Okay, he had it in a loop where it did it 6 times in a row, and the feature that he wrote it for got cut. So it was like he just wrote a bomb for our servers, and I was like, God damn it! I actually got called back from the only vacation I ever took from that job to fix that fucking problem. Because nobody could figure it the hell out. Okay, so we are inside of fetching the stat history. So select star from this. And we need a where. Did I put a where up here on this guy? I did not. Okay, so where account ID, stat context, stat name, and intervals is never null because we've got it. So we need to do this, interval IDs, so this will be fetch stat history is user interval stats. User stat history. We actually need the stat interval for this. Oh man, I got so many things. Okay, otherwise we have to fetch all the intervals. So what we need to do is our stats db.get from user stat interval, or is it just get from stat intervals? Get from user intervals. Do we have any get from user intervals where prepared? All right. What is this going to look for? It's going to look for select star from where, and then we have our statement after that with things. So our statement is going to be so that'll make our statement. Hello, Senecron. I'm working on back-end stuff at the moment. So lots of database calls and all sorts of stuff like that. What, doesn't sound like fun? It's just, I gotta get back into it, and it's a lot of tedious stuff sometimes. I mean, it's not that bad. But it's a lot of stuff that I haven't been working on for a while, so it can be a bit difficult to get back to. So what does the array result have? So get object. So we want get array. All right. So I'm just making sure that it works. Alright, so otherwise we'll get that, otherwise we'll do all this stuff. Alright, so we now have our intervals. Oh, ridiculous. Backend has been good times for you so far? Yeah, backend's not too bad. It's a little bit more structured and all that, but I'm having to write a whole bunch of SQL prepared statement stuff, which is just bleh sometimes. Anyway, I'll be right back. Yeah, well, database stuff is all about design, making sure you got it right. So I've got our design for the stats system and missions, which all tie together. And this is the whole design doc. And I'm working on this piece right here, which has the intervals, the stats storage, and then the stats history. And stats are kind of a, like there are things with databases that are kind of easy and simple and just like they don't go kind of insane, but stats do go insane. Like, in terms of just how much data there is. Because if you're tracking stats for like, okay, cool, we got weekly stats for every user who plays the game for all time. That's a lot of data, and it doesn't go away. So it's got to be organized so your database can actually search that stuff. And you also want to be able to truncate your data, so you have to have all the stats actually nicely indexed so you can do that. I am out of caffeine. I need to go grab one. So, yeah, when I was back at Electronic Arts, the stats database was the biggest thing. But once this is in there, like, we've got stats. Was anything you left on stats useful? Well, that's like the stats for Steam, right? Because, yeah, we had like the Dashkin leaderboards were off on our own thing. So, I think the thoughts are all wrapped up into this. So, I think the conversations we had were useful, but the kind of the meat of the design was, I think, earlier this week. I mean, last week, before the update, I went through and made a big design thing on it. So it's useful to think about, but the design for this whole stat system is pretty, I don't know, it's basically, you got to go into the guts of everything. Alright, so this thing is supposed to fetch the array of user stat intervals, and the user stat intervals have an account ID, an interval context, and, well, that's not interval context, it's just the interval. Alright. So this thing is going to be select from user stats where I can actually chop all this stuff off because I just remembered. What is the table for this? User stats history. Alright, so make a new string builder. Okay, so this prepared statement is going to need to go through every user stat context. All right, so and you just gotta love JDCB with Java. Arrays start at 1 for the database because I don't know. Okay, now we actually need to craft our response, which is going to be this response. All right. So a response is an array of user stat blahs. Alright, so what we have to do now is we have to go through every stat that we just pulled from the database and match it to its stuff. So for stat in res.getArray, we're going to want to do things, and this guy up here, we are going to want a hash map of string to stat interval. So let's go ahead and add those to the map so we can actually look them up later. So add that. We'll also set we'll set this to our interval lookup, which is just intervals. And otherwise, we just do stats dot user stat user interval stats Okay, yeah, just confused. Okay, so that'll build our data structure for this guy, and then we just do our response stats. It's going to be a new array, and then we'll just add everything inside of account stats dot what values. So that'll take all of our raw stat data. We're going to grab the latest intervals if not specified, and we'll grab only specific stats if specific stats are requested, so like only online, only victories. And we'll only get those stats. We'll then organize it by user and return a nice little data structure with absolutely everything inside of it as we want it. That's a lot of code to do that. Alright, cool. So fetch complete stats is the next call we gotta implement, or I have to implement. Alright, so fetch complete stats has got users, stat contexts, and stat names. Max users, I believe it's going to be the max complete users for this guy. Basically, that's just snagging our default user. So complete stats. A complete user stats is going to be an account ID, all the stats that match, and then the interval stats for all the current active intervals. So it's going to be the latest interval in every single type. So intervals are going to get, we're basically going to do this. So snag every interval. And we are going to have to fetch all the stats for that. So this is for a list of users. So again, we're going to have to do this big batch stupid call. So we're going to need this sort of thing here. So alright, we do not need the... Oh, I didn't add it. Good. Alright, so that'll fetch all of our user stats. And we'll also want to fetch the user stats history. So grab the ID out of there and set it. All right. Might want to combine some of this logic, but I'm pretty much almost done with it. I could basically slot these kind of common calls into a, get from blah. But I'm almost done, so. Just one thing I like about working in Java is the nice find replace on everything is pretty convenient. Alright, so we have the stat history, we have the stats, we have everything we need. So we can now create our complete stats. So let's iterate over everything. Okay, so we got stats, interval stats, so we need to add this. Stats, So I got that slotted in there. We then do comp stats, stats. Oh, not interval stats. I started writing fucking stats. So I add the stat. Okay, so we'll again snag this guy. If it's null, we will create the thing. So interval stats is going to be a new thing for this guy. Crap. I'm going to be doing a lot of lookups here. So we'll make our interval stats, but basically we need to do like this user interval stat is we're gonna say what this user stat interval, and we're gonna get this from what the from that. So if that is null, we have to make it. Now we need to add this thing. Also, we can just add this stat to the correct part of our data structure. Wow. Alright. Well, let's make our response then. Since we've got it all nicely organized, we're going to take all the data and just put it into useful stuff. That's just so much of programming is with services is just taking data in one form and putting it into another form. It's like, well, we have all this data, but it's useless. Excellent. Useless data, as we like. And I could do kind of a crappier job on this interface and make everything a lot more difficult to use. But, yeah. Because like it's really easy to make. Okay, cool. We have user stats, so you have a fetch stat call, and for every user you have to call fetch stats. So it's like, all right, cool. Well, you got 100 users, just make 100 fetch stats calls, and then everything just basically turns into database calls. But I'm making this system so you can fetch like, all right, I want these 20 users and give me all their like high scores or something for a specific interval, which is a much more powerful operation. And like the database, we can actually optimize that because it's like, all right, we'll let the database sort that out instead of just like grabbing all the garbage and doing it on some like thick client or something. So that's what I see with a lot of service APIs is they turn into just a mountain of trash. Like, cause it's like, all right, cool. So we did it. We shipped the thing. And you're like, all right, cool. So let's start actually using it. And then like, yeah, it's just pulling teeth. It'd be like, all right, cool. Well, I have to make 50 calls against this service just to get the data I need out of it. It's just like, fuck. Alright, so that's all the fetching for all of our stats. Done. Where do we get warnings for? No warnings. Alright, so now we want to be able to report stats. Let me look at this real quick. Trying to think about this report stats. If I actually have the because we want to protect some of the stats to be like, well, this is official stats from official servers, and this is not official stats. So our servers log in, and they have different rights than a normal user does. So we have enforce and we have admin. So do we have admin actually used anywhere? How do we get this? Okay, so we have the call, we have our call context, but I don't see our... I don't see our authentication level on here. I think we have some of it. Seagal? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Computational geometry algorithms library. So you're doing cool stuff. Damn.